There are some things that we will just never know, like who killed JFK, what happened to Hitler's body, and why is there giant pyramids in the desert. We're going to cover all of these mysteries on today's most amazing top 10 list. But before we get into that, let's do a shout out from our sponsor. Here's the thing, not a lot of you out there have the free time you need to further your education. Well, Blinkist has found a way that you can become the best version of yourself without having to take time away from your busy schedule. Blinkist has over 1,000 free books that people at Blinkist have read and broken down into the most valuable parts. So with Blinkist, you can get the whole book in a 15-minute chunk. All the most important parts of the book will be ready, and you can even listen to them in a 15-minute audiobook format. And this is a very established brand. There are over 14 million Blinkist users now. This is something that you should definitely jump into, and if you are one of the first 100 people to click the link in the description below, you can get access to Blinkist completely free for 7 days. That means you can go through as much of the library as you want for a week straight. And if you choose to become a premium member, you can get up to 65% off retail price audiobooks and also access to the Shortcast, which is a condensed version of a podcast so you don't have to listen to a 3-hour interview. I recommend you start with the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. Now, let's get into this list. Coming at number 10, we have Who Killed John F. Kennedy? Okay, I know that the story in the street is that Lee Harvey Oswald was the one who killed Kennedy. That's what it says in the history books, and that's what the government has been telling us for years, even though it would seem that the story is very different. I mean, we can all accept the story that it was one dude on a grassy knoll who shot the president and then he was caught, but that is literally no fun. And there are too many red flags to think that this story played out the way that they said it did. For one, there were people who wanted JFK dead because he was starting to crack down on organized crime, and this was going to not only lose money for the mob, but also every governor and senator who had their hands in something greasy was going to lose money as well. There was also a tape that made it seem like there was a second shooter who was never caught. JFK's brain went missing before a proper autopsy could be held, which is one of the most suspicious things that I think I've ever heard in my life. Like, how do you lose track of the brain of the president who was just assassinated? And that brain could have shown if there was indeed a second shooter. On top of that, Lee Harvey Oswald was killed before he could stand trial, so we never got to hear how he pulled the whole thing off and why he did it. Then Marilyn Monroe had a mysterious overdose and people think she was killed by the CIA because they didn't want her leaking secrets, and her and JFK were for sure doing the dirty deed. I mean, after you hear all that super shady activity, it kind of all adds up to there's a lot the government isn't telling the public about what happened that day when JFK got shot. So to this day it all stays a secret. Coming at number 9, we have what's going on in Area 51. Just like spilled the beans on this one already. Like, I get it. I get why the American government can't tell us what's going on in Area 51. And it's not because it's some secret evil plan to take over the world. I mean, I'm not saying they're not doing that, but the reason that they don't show us what's going on in Area 51 has nothing to do with that. It's all national security. It's because if they do have high-tech weapons and ships in there that can take over the world and blow things up and fly faster than any ship we've ever seen, and all these things are being built with the help of aliens, then you can't let everyone know, because then Russia and China and every other superpower in the world will want to start doing the same thing, and then your secret weapon is no longer a secret and your country no longer has an edge when war breaks out. And trust me, it's a nice place to be sitting when you know you have an edge on the competition when it comes to war. But how about instead of showing everyone in the world what's going on in Area 51, you just show me. Just bring me in and I won't tell anyone. I promise. I just want to know what's going on. I'll keep my mouth shut and I won't spill any Illuminati secrets. I promise. Coming in number 8, we have the recipe for Roman concrete. Even though we wouldn't do anything with this today because we've got much better tech, it would seem that the Romans had a recipe for concrete that would allow them to build things that would stand for thousands of years. Actually, on second thought, we could use that recipe because nothing made today lasts that long. But whatever they were mixing, we have no idea what went into it. People suspect that they were using volcanic ash and salt water in the mix, but that's about as far as we've gotten. Coming in number 7, we have Hitler's body. The world's most hated man is for sure dead now, but there was a time when people thought he could have still been alive because, as far as I know, no one ever saw his dead body. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this. You don't want someone like Hitler to be worshipped, so you don't want to bury him in somewhere where people can find and then congregate around it, but other people think that there was no body because he actually escaped and then lived out his years in South America. Ho ho! Coming in number 6, we have the KFC recipe. Probably one of the most valuable things that has ever been made besides the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The KFC recipe has never been revealed, and that's actually shocking. How has no one been able to break this down after all this time? I mean, we have machines that can break down molecules of anything, so how can't we find out what the recipe is made of? I think we have that technology. I might have just seen that in a sci-fi movie and now my brain is mistaking it for real life. But the recipe that was made in the 1940s and the official paper that has the full breakdown is locked away back at the KFC headquarters in Louisville. To try and steal this thing, you would need like 6 Ocean 11 teams and 50% of them would die in the process. That thing is locked up tight. Apparently only 2 people on the planet know what actually goes into the chicken, and no one in the world even knows who those people are. So they can never be kidnapped and forced to spill the goods, and they don't even know who each other are. That is some secret stuff. Next on the list, we have oil deposits in America. How much oil is on American land? Well, we have no idea. That is something that the American government has been working very hard to keep under wraps. They don't want anyone to find out how much oil they actually have, because then they can have more power on the market and dictate how the future oil prices move. Also, you don't want to show your cards until you have to, so until it's beneficial for the American government to disclose that information, they are not going to do so. The rumor is if you buy land and find an oil deposit under it, the American government will pay you tons of money for that oil and also pay you to keep your mouth shut about the fact that there is an oil deposit under your land. Next on the list, we have the Coca-Cola recipe. Probably the only thing more valuable than the KFC recipe on the planet is the Coca-Cola recipe. I know I said it was the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but things have changed since the last point, okay? This recipe has been under lock and key since its inception, and for good reason. Even though I can't tell the difference between Coke or Pepsi, some people say that they can, and those people are probably geniuses that would freak out if the recipe ever got leaked, because then Coke would be on every corner in the world, like it already is. Well, much like the KFC recipe, only 2 people know what the Coke recipe is at any given time. And guess what? I know the secret ingredient for Coke. It's sugar. That's really the backbone of the whole project. Alright guys, next on the list we have Who is Anonymous. The world famous hacker group will pop up every now and again when wrongs need to be corrected in the world, but we still have no idea who this group of people is. They could really be anyone. I could be one of them. Not really, I barely know how to spell, I couldn't code. But we do know that they are constantly active. Last time they sprung up was during the BLM protests in America, and they apparently leaked some pretty saucy documents. Coming in at number 2 guys, we got how the pyramids were built. I mean, this might be the greatest mystery of all, but it's only at number 2, so clearly not. But to this day, we are not convinced on one way or the other of how the pyramids were built. Some say it might have been aliens that came down to build them for the pharaohs. Other people think it could have been technology that was simply lost in time, similar to the Roman concrete. But what it probably was just manpower. They had a lot of people working on one thing with no rest, and eventually you get a big triangle in the middle of the desert. And finally, on the number 1 spot, we have the tomb of Genghis Khan. So, you know that dude who caused the deaths of more people than anyone who has ever existed? The guy who built the biggest empire the world has ever seen. The guy who was able to topple kings and queens, emperors and shahs, killed some of the most powerful people of that time without breaking a sweat. Yeah, that dude. No one knows where he's buried. It was a request of the Great Khan to be buried where no one could find him. So the story goes he was buried somewhere on the Burkhan Khaldun mountain. This is apparently the place where he was born as well, but we have no idea if that was even the right place, because after he was buried, everyone who was involved was executed. That way no one could ever answer as to where his body was. On top of this, they apparently let 1,000 horses run wild through the mountains, so no tracker could follow the tracks back to where the tomb was. Yeah, it's safe to say that this guy's body is gone forever. It's because he didn't want to be worshipped after his death. He didn't want to be a Jesus-like figure, and even though he was one of the most horrible people who ever lived, that for sure could have happened. Many people thought he had some sort of supernatural power because of how he was able to conquer so much of the world. Alright guys, that has been your list. I have been your host, Jade Arena. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. There were people who wanted JFK dead because he was starting to crack down on organized crime, and this was going to, this was, but whatever they were mixing, we have no idea what they don't want anyone They don't want anyone to find out how much oil they actually have, because then they can have more